welcome. You're listening to Sports Econ 101, the show where we discuss sports topics from a business perspective. I'm your host, Edward Brown, along with my co-host, Bruce McGowan, longtime sports radio personality. Today's show is going to be really cool because we are expecting to have Jim Barnett from the Golden State Warriors, announcer, and he used to play for them, didn't he?
Played for the Warriors, played 10 years in the NBA, and he played with Bill Russell, and he played with Will Chamberlain and Rick Barry and Pete Maravich, and he's got some great stories.
I've heard of those guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. We are going to ask trivia questions at commercial breaks. We're going to be giving out vacations for the first 3 emails with the correct answer. Vacations are free. They only request a $75 cleaning fee to cover the housekeeping expenses. The radio station you're listening to is not sponsoring it, but the Lighthouse Resort and Marina is. And you will email the answers to edward@sportsecon101.com, and then we'll take the first 3 emails with correct answers. And today's trivia theme, again, since we have Jim on the line, coming up next is the NBA in the 1970s. Yeah, I figured we'd kind of have fun with him on that.
Oh, yeah.
And we know that you enjoy that, too. This segment of Sports Econ 101 is sponsored by Pacific Private Money, providing mortgage investments that are currently yielding over 8%. They actually just came out with their newsletter, 8.15%.
Wow, that's impressive.
And their loan to value is less than 50%. Very conservative.
That is conservative.
So it doesn't get any more conservative than that I know of. Check them out at pacificprivatemoney.com. Let them know that you heard them on Sports Econ 101, because we are economics and sports, and that's real estate. So that's,
Sure.
that's close
Now,
enough.
we can ask Jim Barnett what kind of money he used to make back in the day compared to today's players. I'll tell you, he made decent money, but compared to today,
Oh, my gosh.
holy moly.
Yeah.
Jeez. I think he had to have a part-time job on the side.
I was going to ask.
No,
I think he did?
I think early on he may have had, well, of course the NBA season's fairly long, but in those days, you still had 3 or 4 months off, so probably he did.
Yeah. And I mean, he was a good player.
He was a good player. He wasn't a fantastic player, but he was a very good player. You play 10 years in the NBA, you're pretty good.
Yeah, especially if you don't get hurt.
Yeah, he was lucky in that regard. He didn't have any major injury problems.
All right, stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. When we come back, we're expecting to have Jim Barnett, Golden State Warriors announcer, on the phone with us. Stay tuned. Okay.
All right. Good deal.
About time.
Jim is pretty reliable. Hopefully he'll be there.
Good. Very nice.
He's a great guy. He is a great guy. It's funny. He was going to retire a couple years ago, but then he just said, "No, I'm having so much fun doing this, and the team is getting so good."
Oh, yeah.
After all the bad years.
It's a good thing he didn't.
Yeah. He's been doing this now, I think, since 85, 86.
Oh, wow.
He's been on the air, which is, that's 28 years.
So
27 years, 28,
yeah,
29.
so he's probably been retired for about 15 years.
He retired in, I think, let's see, he was 2, 3 years older than me. So he started in about 70. Oh, no, actually, no, take that back. Jim started in 67, 66. That was his rookie year. So Jim is now, he was 70 years old. So he played from 66 to 76. 66 to 76, yes. He played on the Boston Celtics, his first team. And a great story about that. I'm sure he'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get to cover a couple of these things, but that's okay.
Oh, she was. Oh, you're talking about the.
Yeah, it was like the piping.
Oh, yeah.
But that's okay. It was kind of fun.
She's great.
She's really sweet.
Yeah, she's really nice.
You see this thing, Sports Illustrated 7/7 Manute Bowl doll?
I know. I was out there when I wanted to get one of those that night, but I don't ask for the freebies anymore.
How big? I wonder how big the thing was.
No, it was actually 7'7". They had it set up in the lobby, and then they gave away the little regular ones to everybody who showed up.
He was a really nice guy, wasn't he?
He was a very nice man. And he had like 4 wives and like 12 kids. He's from Sudan.
Sudan, that's right.
So he was kind of into the old tribal thing. But he took all his money, not all of it, but he took a lot of it and tried to help his fellow countrymen.
Yeah.
That's a real poor country. Sudan. Oh my God, yeah.
So he actually had 4 current,
4 wives and and I think actually about 9 kids. Yeah. He took care of them though.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's almost like the Mormon patriarchy.
Yeah.
My great-great-grandfather was Brigham Young, but not by blood. And I may have told you this story. Back in the day when the Mormon settlement was being built up in Salt Lake City, there were situations where the husband died, or the husband ran off, or the husband.
The brothers took over, didn't they?
Well, what happened? Yeah, oftentimes other families would take in and even marry the woman, and she'd be the second wife, and the kids would be part of the family. Brigham Young, because he was the leader of the church, he took in 36 wives. Now everybody says, "Oh, he had all these women," or maybe 26. And he was probably screwing around with some of the other ones.
But he took him in as in order to take care of them as they lost.
Take care of them, and they helped him. Yeah. And so my great-grandfather, whatever happened to him, he ran off, died, whatever. So my great-grandmother was taken in by Brigham Young.
Wow.
My great-great-grandmother.
Yeah.
And her son, Royal Young, became an elder of the Mormon church. He was a big, right up near the top.
Wow.
This would be back in the 1890s, 1900s. Yeah. So my grandmother, she was one of 8 daughters that this guy had. The youngest one.
Imagine.
Yeah, so, and my mom is her daughter, so it's an interesting story.
Wow, that's...
Yeah. I have the Mormons, and they're an interesting, it's the most successful religious cult of its time.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. Well, it's so isolated, out there in Salt Lake, but they're spread out everywhere now.
Shit, I don't know if it's cell or home.
It's probably a cell, because he's probably on the road.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he's got to be on the road. They're playing a couple more games here.
Jim, it's Edward Brown and Bruce McGowan.
Okay, guys, how are you?
Great, how are you?
All right.
Jim, where are you, by the way? I know you were in Philly last night. The Warriors played one more road game.
We're in Minneapolis.
Ah, that's right. Okay. For some reason, I thought Washington. I wasn't looking at my schedule. But how's the weather? How's the weather up there?
My question is, I have no idea what Econ 101 is.
It's Sports Econ 101. Sports Byline USA is the one who's like our flagship, I guess. And then we're all over the country in various, New York and Florida and Las Vegas.
Is this an online thing, though?
No. We're actually on terrestrial stations, but then we also are covered via iHeartRadio, TuneIn. According to Sports Byline, they claim we have 200,000 listeners, but I can't verify what they claim. But we are in like 20, 30 different stations, along with the online stuff. But we are in real radio, real.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, Jim, have you been on this show before? Once, a couple years ago, wasn't he?
No.
He wasn't. Okay.
No.
You sure?
I don't know. I do too many things, but I'm on Byline with, what's his name?
Ron Barr. Yeah.
So this is Ron Barr's station.
Yeah.
All right. So what we'll do, I know Bruce has got a lot of fun stories, and I know you do too. And we'll just have fun with it, okay?
How long do you want me?
As long as you can give us.
Okay. 20 minutes enough?
That would be perfect. We appreciate having you on.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. And we have on the phone Jim Barnett, who is the Warriors broadcaster.
Jim's been working on the Warriors as the color announcer on television for, Jim, is it 28 years now?
This is actually year number 30.
Wow. So you've seen some good games of late, especially. What is that like? Because the Warriors have been one of the best teams in basketball after so many years of such drudgery.
Well, I'll tell you, I've enjoyed every year, even the bad ones, and I believe, they're going to finish after tomorrow. That will be 51 games played already, and they've won 41, and in 16 of the last 20 years, they never even reached 40 wins in any of those seasons. So it's new, but it's always been a great organization in so many aspects. They've had some turmoil at times, but the fans have always made it worthwhile because the fans have been coming for all the years, and it's just always been exciting for me because something's new happening every night. And I've been around the NBA for a long time, but there's no question that this year is very, very special, and there are huge expectations, and probably a little of most of them are premature because they've got, right now the best record in the NBA, but you've got to prove it in the playoffs. And there are teams that have gone years and years with tremendous records and even getting into the playoffs only to be disappointed. So that's where they have to prove it this year, and hopefully that will transpire.
Well, I remember when Baron Davis had the famous dunk over Karolinko, and it's like we were all getting excited out here. And then the record, I don't remember what their record was getting into the playoffs, but so many teams make the playoffs.
Well, I believe they won, I don't know, something. They might have gotten in that year with 42 wins, 42-40,
yeah.
And ironically, then they upset the number 1 seed who had the best record in the league, the Dallas Mavericks, and they were 67-15, and the Warriors beat them in 6 games.
Yeah.
They did a great job on Nowitzki, and Baron Davis and Steven Jackson had terrific series, and Baron had one of those special playoff series where you couldn't be stopped. The next series, going to Utah, which would have put them in the Western Conference Finals, to me, that series was lost in Game 1 when the Warriors had a 5-point lead in Utah with 55 seconds to go and someone shooting 2 free throws. I won't name him, but he missed both free throws. Then Baron Davis stepped out of bounds, and Aaron Williams hit a shot with no time left. It went to overtime, lost the game in overtime, and eventually lost the series. But had they won Game 1, they were on such a roll. Had they won Game 1 in Utah, you might have seen another upset, and the Warriors would have been in the NBA Finals. And that did not come to happen. So, lots of things can happen in the playoffs, but this team is much better than that Baron Davis team, the We Believe team of 2007.
Sure.
And I will add this: in 2008, they won 48 games and did not make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And with the Western Conference this year, that could happen to several different teams. It could happen to Phoenix. It could happen to Oklahoma City. It could happen to New Orleans. The West is so strong, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if someone won 48, 49 games and couldn't make it into the playoffs.
Wow.
What was it like to call the game where Klay Thompson scored 37 points in the third quarter?
Well, that was totally unreal. He was unconscious, and it happens, and he was in that zone. And when you get in that zone, you feel like you're the only player on the court. I know what that feels like. I've never scored 37 in a quarter, but I've had some big quarters and big games. And when you get into that, and the great players get into that zone more often. I've talked to Jerry West about that, where the game slows down for you. And, he always told me that every night the game slowed down for him. I said, gee, no wonder I never had a chance.
Well, also what's good is if you're...
For me, it was, what happened 6 or 8 times in a season where the game would really slow down, and, you might get 18 points in a quarter, or you might have a 38-point game in 35 minutes or some crazy thing like that.
Yeah.
But for Klay, in 12 minutes to score 37 points, and he actually scored 19 in the last 3 minutes and 55 seconds or something like that. It was pretty incredible.
Well, what's great is when you...
Never missed a shot. He was 13 for 13, had a couple of free throws. He was 9 for 9 from 3-point range. But he never missed a shot. He even took a practice shot from 3-point range when he got fouled, and it didn't count. He just threw it up there anyway, and it went in. I mean, he couldn't miss that quarter. It was something to behold. It's an NBA record. So
what's great is when you have when your teammates can recognize it and then just keep feeding you the ball because they know you're hot.
Oh, sure. Yeah, at the end, there's nobody else who's going to take a shot, and everyone knew that after about halfway through that quarter. He took over himself, and sometimes he was going 1-on-3.
Yeah.
But when you're in that zone, you know exactly what the defenders are going to be doing. You know you're going to take a dribble to the right. You know that someone's going to take a stab to the ball and miss it. So you're going to cross back over, and you're going to beat him, and you're going to take one dribble, and then you're going to pick the ball up, and you're going to carry it right to the rim. And it's effortless when that happens. And you just have to be in that effortless zone for 12 minutes.
I was watching Steph Curry the other night, and he does the same thing. It's just uncanny, Jim. And we're talking with Jim Barnett, Warrior broadcaster, longtime television analyst. It absolutely boggles my mind when I watch this guy play because, a physical stature. He's slight. He's not a big, husky guy. He doesn't have the great length. But he seems to know how to play this game right now at such a high level. It's almost like he's from another world.
Catch and shoot.
Yeah. But, it's more than that. Just the way he moves on defense, the way he anticipates, knocking balls away. Have you seen anybody who's been in that kind of a zone very often, Jim?
Well, the great players, Oscar Robertson from my era, Jerry West, of course. The year Nate Archibald led the league in both scoring and assists. It's only been done once, and he did it. back in the early 70s. There have been great players before, but he's special. I've never seen a quicker shot. I don't really think well, you know what? I was going to say I don't think I've seen a better shooter, but I can't say that because there were a lot of great shooters around that you never heard of, even though they didn't do much, but they couldn't do all the other things, so they were limited. If you want to talk about just straight shooting, there have been great shooters, but not to the extent where they have to control the ball all the time like Steph does. He's pretty unique in that way. And one thing about him is such a great ball. He's got all the skills. He has all the fundamentals. He's fundamentally sound, and a lot of players today are not fundamentally sound. They're just great athletes still learning how to play the game. But he learned how to play the game properly. He's got a good pedigree and great parenting from both his parents, but as far as basketball, from his dad. And that's the same thing with Klay Thompson, by the way. His dad played in the NBA, so they've had great tutelage. But for Steph Curry, the uniqueness of him is he loves the big moments, and he's also, one reason he's so popular is, like you said, he's not an overpowering individual physical specimen. He's not like LeBron James or others in the league. He's an everyman out there, and people can identify with him. I don't think he has an enemy in the world. As a basketball fan, there are a lot of people that don't like Kobe. I'm sure there are a lot of people that don't like LeBron James. I've never met anybody who doesn't like Steph Curry.
And
Everyone likes.
didn't he get the most? He got more votes than LeBron for the All-Star.
He right now, actually, with that, it's confirmed and validated that he's the most popular player in the NBA right now.
That's a great story too, because a couple of years ago when the Warriors drafted him, he was a good player. We knew it, and we knew he was going to be solid. But this guy has taken his. And the thing about him is also, Jim, and you know this because you're with him a lot more than anybody else. You're traveling with the team. He's very even keeled. I mean, he's a normal guy. He doesn't sound like one of these guys who's off, hanging out with the gang afterwards, going to the nightclubs. He's going home to his wife and just kind of having a normal life.
Yes, he's got one child, Riley, and one that's going to be born in July of 2015. His wife is pregnant, Aisha. They're a great family, but as I said, he comes from a terrific family. Both of his parents are outstanding people, and he's pretty remarkable. He's got very grounded. He knows who he is. He's got a great faith about him, and he puts things in perspective. And so a lot of good things are going to happen for him, and hopefully he's got to be rewarded sometime for an NBA championship, and that would be the culmination of everything that try to succeed in the NBA. He doesn't care about his individual statistics, but he knows how to fill up a box score, and he's just so good in so many areas. And people thought, well, he's not really a point guard; he's a shooting guard. Well, no, he can do both, and he's outstanding in both respects. And he wants to get better. He gets better. Seriously, he gets better every month that goes along.
Yeah. Hey, Jim. He doesn't sit on his laurels. He doesn't say. He will never say, "I've arrived." That's another thing that's beautiful about him, because that's not true with every professional athlete, particularly in the NBA. He is never going to be complacent. Okay, Jim, stay with us. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break here. Here's the trivia question, and when we come back, Jim will join us for just one more segment.
Let Jim try to answer this.
Oh, he will. I know, but not right now. When we come back, he'll answer. Okay. Who won the most scoring titles in the 1970s? We're talking the NBA. All right, stay with us. Sports Econ 101 will be right back.
You're talking about individual?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
All right. Okay, so let me just save this file here. We'll just do one more quick one.
Good stuff, Jim, as usual.
Yeah, very good. I know that
you guys are you staying away from the winter cold and all that nonsense with the?
I've been sick for 2 weeks.
Oh,
I'm on antibiotics for a week, so I'm better.
Man.
God, how do you?
You're a trooper.
I lost my voice in 2 games.
Oh.
I was telling Ed, I got Edward, I got a tape, a lot of old tapes of Bill King, and I have the Immaculate Reception call in his game. He actually called a basketball game after he did that over in Philadelphia.
Really? Oh my gosh!
Can you imagine that?
Yeah. What do you do when you lose your voice? I was wondering how the coaches keep their voices too.
Some of them don't.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. When we get to the first commercial break, we ask this trivia question. Who won the most scoring titles in the NBA in the 1970s?
And I bet you Jim Barnett, our guest, who is a former player and a longtime broadcaster might have an idea. I'm thinking, Jim. Well, I'll let you try. Go ahead.
Well, I would presume, just off the top of my head, that would be Bob McAdoo.
You are correct. Very good. I guess it helps when you played in the 70s, you know?
I believe, yeah, it was right in my era, and I played against Bob. I believe he did it 3 years in a row.
Yeah, that's right.
So 73, 4, 5,
Yeah, that's it.
something like that.
And he was MVP in 74, 75, the year Rick Barry of the Warriors took the Warriors to the championships. And you've always contended, and I think a lot of people, Jim, and maybe rightly so, that Rick Barry probably had a better year that year, but he did get the championship MVP award when they swept the Washington Bullets and upset them. But Barry was amazing that year.
Yes, but the MVP award is given prior to the NBA Finals being played. And that's one of the problems. And another problem with that is, in that era, that MVP award was voted by the players. Players, not the media.
Interesting.
And Rick was never a very popular player around the NBA. That's a fact.
And why is that? Why was that, Jim?
By the way, he should have been the MVP that year.
Why was Rick not so popular, though, Jim? Explain.
I mean, everyone knows that.
Yeah.
That's a rhetorical question.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of younger people may not know.
Yeah, they don't know.
Yeah.
He just rubbed people the wrong way. They felt he was a know-it-all, and he felt that people felt that he was a little, I don't know, blunt, maybe a little too blunt, and overbearing at times. And so he just did not have a great reputation among opponents in the NBA. And so that was one reason he got kind of blackballed in a way.
Huh. But you played with him, and you saw what a great player he was. And the interesting thing was he had been over in the ABA. He had jumped to the ABA, and when he came back to play in the NBA after, I guess he was 27, 28, 29, something like that when he came back, he actually had a pretty serious knee injury, and he wasn't nearly as good as he had been, but he was still pretty darn good.
He was, yes, he was. His second year, he averaged about 24 and a half his first year in the league. I was still in college. And then his second year, he averaged 35.6 and led the league in scoring. And, every year he'd shoot 90% from the free throw line. And that was his highest year ever. And then he went to the ABA and came back, but he was still good. What happened? Because of that knee injury, he didn't go to the basket nearly as much. He still got fouled a lot, but not to the extent, where it would not be unusual for him to shoot 20 free throws in a game when he first came into the league. But what it did, Bruce, is it enabled him to develop his outside shot. He became a better shooter.
Yeah.
He became more of a pure shooter the last 10 years that he was in the league. And he was a great marksman. And I'm going to say this because I'm going to stick up for him in this way. First of all, he's a friend of mine. But I recently saw a listing of the 50 greatest players in the NBA's history by Dwayne Wade, I believe it was, out of Miami. He had his top 50 list. And, back in 1997, 96, 97, that was the 50-year celebration of the NBA. He had the top 50 players. And, of course, he's on that list. And as many other of my teammates and, of course, opponents are. But he was left off the list by Dwayne Wade.
That's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
And I had to answer. I had to write in on that. I said any list that doesn't have Rick Barry in the top 50 of all time is not a valid list. Throw it away. It's not worth anything. And I would go far as to say this. I've got my 10 greatest players. And I'm not talking about any players who are active in the NBA today. So excluding those, to me, Rick Barry, at least he's going to be the 10th player on that list. I believe he is one of the 10 greatest players to ever play this game based upon everything that you can do on a basketball court. I played with him for 2 years. I played with all these other great players, and against them, he could do everything. He had no weakness. He was a great passer. He never missed. If you went backdoor in a half-court situation, he saw everything on the floor. He's the coach on the floor. He could do everything. He could defend.
Kind of a Larry Bird
type. One year, and I'm going on, but this guy was a great player, and people don't appreciate it because he's kind of been, pushed aside.
Well, I think Dwayne, he's a little too young. You got to go back to the people who were more our age, to remember.
Well, he went back and had guys like Bill Russell in there, of course, and stuff. But you just can't overlook everyone, and that's what I was going to say. Sam Jones was a great shooter, and I think if he took 3-point shots from the corner, he'd make just as many as Steph Curry and Klay Thompson or Ray Allen or anybody else, or Reggie Miller in his day. So, Chris Mullin.
Yeah, Chris Mullin.
Is there a better 20-foot shooter than Chris Mullin ever in the history of the game? I could name guys like Dick Snyder, who never got layups, or John McLaughlin in Milwaukee, who both of them shot 51% for their careers, and they were so slow they couldn't get to the basket. All their shots were jump shots.
You know, I got to say, Jim,
Those were great shooters.
I really appreciate watching you on TV because you don't hold punches back. You know, it's like when players are not playing well, I honestly appreciate when you say, "Oh, that was a terrible play. What was he thinking?" You know, because too many times I think the commentators are just trying to please the audience, and I just.
I try to avoid saying that's a terrible thing or something, but I have said that. I think there's a way of pointing things out without pointing a finger and trying to criticize too much. But it's called semantics, and it's called use of vocabulary words, which I think is very important as a broadcaster. A lot of people don't think vocabulary is important, and so forth. But you have to be honest, and you want to. Obviously, I root for the Warriors. I want them to win, but I cannot afford to be a homer. But you can't please everybody. I'm on Twitter, so you're going to get people who tweet in the same game and saying, "Gee, I don't think he likes the Warriors." The other guy says, "Oh, you're a homer." At the same time.
Hey, Jim.
Everybody hears what they want to hear.
Definitely. You mentioned Bill Russell, and the amazing thing about Jim Barnett's career, you're kind of the Forrest Gump of the NBA because you played with Pistol Pete Maravich, you played with Dr. J, you played with Rick Barry, and your first experience in the NBA was as a rookie playing for the Boston Celtics, who had won all these championships, and Bill Russell was your coach. What a story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was terrific. He was the first African-American coach in any professional sport. They had won 8 straight championships, and unfortunately, that year, my rookie year, the only year I was there, they lost. I left and went to the San Diego Rockets in expansion, which is now the Houston franchise. They were in San Diego for 4 years, and then they won 2 more. So Bill won 11 titles in 13 years. He came there in 1956-57. He won a title as a rookie. Then they lost to the St. Louis Hawks in 58, and then they won 8 straight. Lost my rookie year, and then they won 2 more. That's what a great player he was. He was a winner, and he was someone that at the defensive end there's never been his peer. He was so good in so many aspects, and they had great players. I mean, they had Sam Jones, they had Casey Jones in the backcourt, brought Havlicek off the bench. It was just a tremendous team, and they knew how to win, and they had tradition going for him. But he was very fair, and I will say this: he was about 34 at that time. Never practiced. Our practices were about a half hour long, and he would sit on the sideline in full dress, and he would read the paper, drink coffee, and look up. And we always had little men scrimmage against the big men. It just was a different era in that time. He was the player coach. There was no assistant coach. There were only like 4 people in the organization with Red Auerbach up there. So it just was a very different league. And I made $11,000, by the way. I didn't make $1,000 a month that entire season. But I will tell you one story. This kind of sums up Bill Russell. They knew how to play. They knew what they had to do. And we were in a city, and we traveled a lot. And sometimes the planes are delayed. We traveled the day of the game. And so we played in exhibition. I'm just going to tell you, we played 15 games in exhibition season, played 12 games in 12 straight nights in 10 different states. And most of the time traveling by bus. These guys would have no idea what that was like. So we're in an arena, and they always had the security guy come in and tell us 20 minutes before game time. So the man comes in and says, 20 minutes before game time, Mr. Russell. He said, thank you. He looks around, he says, we playing tonight. Baltimore? No, that's not it. Chicago? No, that's not it. Detroit? We're playing the Detroit Pistons. Well, this is the pregame talk now. He said, let's go out there and get this shit over with.
That was Bill Russell, though, wasn't it? And do you still keep in touch with him? Have you ever seen him?
That cackle.
Yeah, that cackle.
That's verbatim.
Wow.
There were never pregame talks very often. I mean, a little bit of a thing, but that was it. That was the pregame talk that night.
Wow.
We won 61 games that year.
He's from the Bay Area, too. You broadcast out of the Bay Area, out of the East Bay. He's up in Seattle now or living somewhere else. Do you run into him ever any place in the last few years? Yeah.
No, he comes back. And
okay.
In fact, there's a wall of distinction and retirement jersey back in his high school there in Oakland.
Mm.
And that was about maybe 3 years ago or 2 years ago when they honored him. finally, after all of these years, the name slips right now, but it's the same place where.
Did Oakland Tech?
Well, no.
Castlemont?
McClymonds. He went to
McClymonds, there you go.
Joe Ellis went to McClymonds.
That's right.
So Paul West, excuse me, who's our great rebounder from that era? Paul, the great rebounder. Come on, Bruce.
Oh, boy.
Talking about.
I've spent too much time hiking out in the hills today. My brain is still not as sharp as yours, Jim.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll think on that one. We got to
Yeah.
cut to our second commercial break here. We're on the phone with Jim Barnett, former NBA player and announcer for the Warriors. Here's our here's our second commercial break trivia question, talking NBA here. In the 1970s. In the 1978 finals, a player went 0 for 14 in a Game 7 loss, then came back the next year to win the finals MVP and the championship. Who was he? All right, the first three emails with the correct answer are going to win a free 3-day, 2-night stay at the Lighthouse Resort. Email Edward at SportsEcon101, the answer to that question. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You hanging in there, Jim?
Yeah, I am, but it's Paul Silas. I don't know why.
I did the same. Paul Silas stopped coaching a few years ago. What's he up to? He's got to be in his 70s now, huh?
Well, of course, because I'm 70.
Are you really, Jim? Seriously?
No, I'm 70.
I'm about to turn
He's
63.
in Charlotte. He's got a house there in Lake Norman in Charlotte. So how long is the next segment going to be? A little shorter?
And then you just let us know if you need to go. I know Bruce wanted to ask you a couple of
and we'll get out of here.
couple of quick
We've
final
already been
questions.
going 35,
Yeah. Oh,
35
Jesus.
minutes
Oh, God.
already.
Okay.
Here's the deal.
You tell us
Let me see here.
what works for you.
I'll take it. I'll take a risk at that other guy and the other thing too. But yeah, I wish you could edit out there where I forget the guy's name because that's not. But I guess it's human nature. So
That's okay.
Don't worry about
No,
it.
you just come back and come back and say you remembered. Okay.
Paul Silas of the Hawks.
Yeah.
And a great coach, too.
Funny, I remember a couple of years ago when the Warriors weren't doing well, I told Jerry West, I said, Jerry, get your uniform ready. They're going to need you. But now, they don't need him now.
No.
They're doing well. Okay. Here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Edward Brown and Bruce McGowan here. Let's see. Second commercial trivia question. In the 1978 NBA Finals, a player went 0 for 14 in a Game 7 loss, then came back the next year to win the Finals MVP and the championship. Who was he?
I think, Jim, I think it was Dennis Johnson of the Sonics. Does that sound right?
Well, I was going to ask you. He had to be on the Sonics.
Yeah.
That is correct. And that's
because they won it in '79. I think they lost.
In 78.
They lost to Washington in '78, if I'm not mistaken.
And then they beat Washington in 79.
That's right, Dennis Johnson. And during the break, I think you remembered who Paul was.
Oh, yeah, yes. Paul Silas, who went to Creighton, was a great rebounder and played. He played in 3 decades in the NBA because he came out of Creighton in trying to think what year it was. He was in the '60s, and then he played in '79. He also played in the 1980s. 80-81 season. So he lasted, he crossed over 3 decades, a great rebounder that he was. And of course, he went on to become an NBA coach. He lives in Charlotte.
It's almost like Nolan Ryan.
His son Stephen is one of the assistant coaches under Steve Clifford.
One of his sons, did you say, Jim, one of his sons is the assistant?
Yeah, Stephen, his son.
Oh, that's, okay, yeah, of course. Stephen Silas, yeah.
You wanted to ask?
No, I was going to ask Jim, looking back at the era that you played, Jim, you didn't make a lot of money, and the travel was sometimes kind of rough. But there was talk about the intimacy of the game and the relationships that you had with the players. Because we mentioned Russell, Barry, Pistol Pete, Dr. J. I mean, Tom. I'll give you an example. Tom Meschery. A lot of our listeners don't know who Tom Meschery was. Great player from the 1960s with the Warriors, and tell us a little bit about this guy, because he was kind of an unusual player, and you played, and you got to know him a little bit, Jim.
I know Tom real well. I talked to him quite frequently. Well, he was, his parents immigrated from, China, Russia area, if you will, and they were actually in an internment camp, World War II, a Japanese internment camp for a couple of years, and they came over to the Bay Area, came to San Francisco. He went to high school, in Lowell High School in San Francisco. Then he went to St. Mary's, and I believe he was the number 6 overall pick in the NBA draft in 1961, and he was drafted by the Philadelphia Warriors, ironically. He went back and played in Philadelphia 1 year, and then the Warriors moved to San Francisco, so it was really a nice homecoming for him. but he just was from the old school. This guy was tough. He's 6'7", and he was a power forward. And there was a ball to be retrieved off the board, and he wasn't anywhere near it. He was going to come up with the ball, and he might get 6 fouls in the game, but he was going to go down fighting for it. And he was a pretty good shooter, mid-range shooter, but he was just a heck of a basketball player. They had such great respect for him that Frank Lemuley, who owned the Warriors for all those years, until 1986, he gave him his first retirement jersey. And so Tom's jersey, number 14, was the first one to be hung in the arena. And actually, when I joined the team, or just before, his number 14 was part of the jersey of the Warriors. It was part of the logo, if you will.
That's right.
And the NBA said you can't do that. So that's how much esteem and respect that he claims while he played. But it was you have to understand, it was a smaller league. There wasn't a lot of money. We were trying to survive, and it was more like extended college, if you will. And so people weren't playing for the money per se. They were playing for to say that they're playing in the best league in the world, and it was a more intimate, like a fraternity situation. And we were all in the same boat, and the writers traveled with us, and the writers knew what to write and knew what not to write. It wasn't like today. You could get away with things in that era. I mean, I'm not talking about things that are going to break the law and things, but the writers were your friends. That didn't mean that they didn't criticize you, or they were certainly nonpartisan in their coverage, but they weren't worried about the off-court personal things that you might do, and they weren't looking for stories like they are today. It's a whole different world. You weren't as exposed, and the whole NBA organization, we were all one big family, and even your opponents, sure, you had to treat them as enemies sometimes, but it was we understood the bigger picture.
Did you have a second job?
I did actually. I went into the National Guard. Otherwise, I'm going to be drafted.
Yeah. That's right.
So I got to the National Guard in the Massachusetts National Guard with the Celtics, and then I was in that for 6 years. But in the summertime, the first summer after San Diego, my second year in the league, I sold life insurance. And then after that, the next year I was a playground leader because I just did that to kind of be around a gym because I could use the gym anytime that I wanted at a local high school. So I did that. And then I did not work in the summers after that, but I did work for a couple of summers, yes.
And you played 10 years. And Jim, I don't know if a lot of our listeners remember when Jim played, or Jim actually playing, but he was a very, very, very capable guy coming off the bench and giving the team a spark. And those are the kind of players sometimes that can really give a team a jolt. And you weren't afraid to take a dive. I remember Bill King always used to say, Jim Barnett just came up with a mouthful of splinters on that last play. So
I'll tell you something. First of all, I got picked up by Philadelphia my last year, so I actually got credit for 11 years in the NBA. And I played. I haven't ever looked at it, but I would say I probably, I started every game in Portland. I started in San Diego half the time. I probably started in my career 60% of the time in the games that I played. But it didn't bother me to come off the bench, and I did early in my career, and then I did later in my career. And when I backed up Walt Frazier and Earl Monroe, I don't think there's any shame in being the third guard on that team when you have players like that. But I'll give you an example of what it was like. First of all, I never had an agent. In my first year, Red Auerbach, he wouldn't even deal with an agent. Our second-round draft pick, by the way, you could be the 11th pick in the draft. That's a second-rounder, the number 11 pick for the running kid team. So he had an agent or something, and the bottom line is he wanted too much money, so he never even showed up in training camp. Wow. I never saw the guy, never heard from him again. His name was Leon Clark from Wyoming. But here's the deal. I came to the Warriors in 1971 after having an excellent season in Portland the year before, my best overall scoring season. And I'd averaged 18 and a half up there, so I got traded for 3 draft picks. So I came down, and Al liked the way I played. He had a lot of respect because I played defense. I was a good driver, very quick, and I didn't back down from anybody. So now we're going halfway through the year, and Fritz Williams, who had been their number 1 draft pick a couple of years ago, somehow it made him nervous, and so he couldn't play very well. And they inserted me, and it was actually during that season, 71-72, we won 2 games that I started. We won 9 more in a row. So we won 11 straight games, and I started all the rest of the year. And and then I went to the playoffs and started against Milwaukee in the 5-game series. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just telling you I'm going to lead up to
That's
something.
fine.
I averaged 22 points a game in the series.
Wow.
And in 5 games, I went to the free throw line 41 times. That's 8 times a game. So now he rolls around to training camp the next year, and Fritz Williams was our starter again. You know, it was already just done that way, and I was going to come off the bench. Today, you would have the guy's agent calling the team and say, trade me, calling the GM and saying, you know, you can't treat my client that way. Look what he did. And I mean, never bothered me a bit. I told Al, I 6-man coming out. I love to come off the bench. That's fine with me. But the same thing happened. It was duplicated in the next year, 72, 73. And then I took over halfway through, and they eventually traded Fritz to Milwaukee. But it was a different kind of league, and we couldn't afford to have egos. First of all, we didn't have guaranteed contracts for the most part. Some may have. I never had a guaranteed contract in 11 years. So the bottom line, I played my ass off every night because some guys tried to take my job.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, what did you?
I didn't want to be Wally Tip.
Hey, before we let you go, Jim, I got to ask you about this Warrior team again. I mean, we talked about Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, the 2 All-Stars, but they don't get to the level they're at without a terrific coach who's a rookie coach, Steve Kerr, and this amazing bench. You know, Andre Iguodala, Lee, and then Draymond Green, who has been a spark as a starter. I mean, tell us a little bit about this Warrior team that people don't know about.
Yeah, and also Maurice Spates is third leading scorer, shooting 51, 52% this year, doubling his career average. They've got stars on the team, but they don't have to rely just on Curry and Thompson. They've got enough depth. And Andrew Bogut is a big part of that at the defensive end, but also at the offensive end, the way he facilitates the offense. I would like him to score more. And if you look at Andre Iguodala, you know, like you want to just look at numbers, his numbers are way down from his career and all that stuff. But that doesn't mean on this team, they don't need that kind of impact from him. And so he's a catalyst out there. They run. Their real strength is getting out, playing some defense, getting the ball and pushing up the floor. And when Andre Iguodala is on the floor, that's the time when they do that the best. He's a great facilitator that way, and he looks and pushes it all the time, and he sees the floor. But this is a team that's very, very deep, but they're going to need to be healthy. Especially going to have Andrew Bogut healthy to defend the rim as well as he does, and he does it extremely well in order for them to go far in the playoffs.
Well, great. Jim, thank you so much for all the time that you gave us today. I know you're quite busy and doing a lot of traveling there.
Yeah, it's part of the NBA life. I've been doing it for the Warriors for 30 years, and I like it. I enjoy it. It brings me a great deal of satisfaction. And every game, as I said, every game is different, even in the bad years. Every game is new. Everything presents a new opportunity, and I just have some natural enthusiasm. It's a great gift, so it works in perfectly.
Well, I can say this for Jim Barnett. Of all the broadcasters that work in our area, and we have some good ones here, he's right at the top of my list because he makes the game. Not only does he tell you about what's going on, it's little things that you might not be paying attention to, but he brings that enthusiasm and that color. And Jim, thanks so much for doing that. Keep up the great work.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thanks again, Jim.
All right.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about, having to keep up your excitement for every game because, you're a broadcaster and, you may see a lot of the plays kind of the same, but, you have to people are watching you on TV.
You got to put a little life in it, but it has to be honest and natural. And I think that's one of the things when you play the game, you can understand that part of it. And when you're around the game, and I've covered a lot of basketball games, but I didn't. I played a little high school ball, but I never was very good in high school. But you have to tap into that energy that you see on the floor and translate that for the fans. And that's what some of these broadcasters do so well. Not all of them, but some of them. And Jim is one of those guys. And we're lucky to have him. He's a local guy in the Bay Area only, but I'll tell you something. The Warriors are having a special season this year, and if they don't get to at least the conference finals, I would be shocked because it's just too deep a team and too talented a team.
I wonder if he ever wants to throw his advice on there.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
Confer with Steve Kerr. And,
well, he's kind of like a coach in a sense. Although Jim will be the first to tell you, hey, that's not my job. My job is to be a broadcaster first, and to do that, he's got to be sort of the eyes and ears of the fans, and I think people appreciate that.
That's what he's doing now.
Well,
he probably could be a coach.
He probably could be, but I don't think you want the headaches. It's interesting. John Gruden said that very thing. John loved being a head coach in the NFL, but the NFL is just an all-consuming 16, 18-hour day. And, you know, John Gruden was not notorious for showing up at the Raiders headquarters at 4 in the morning and getting ready to work at 4 a.m. in the morning. Now, you know, he puts in his hours, but when he does his Monday night games on ESPN,
that's a lot easier.
It is a lot easier. It is. And he'll be the first to admit it.
All right, we're
A
going to
lot more fun, too.
Oh, bad.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to cut to our third and final commercial break. Trivia question: NBA in the 1970s. In the 1970s, only 2 players led the league in both scoring and assists in a season.
Wow.
Who were they?
Okay.
All right. Stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. It was great having Jim Barnett on there. And when we come back, we're going to have some closing comments.
Jim is a cracker because you could tell the poor guy, his throat, his voice.
Oh, I know. I was appreciative that he was able to give this to us.
And Jim is a great guy, but he's a little bit of a curmudgeon. But he'll at the same time, though, he'll just talk your ear off.
No, he did great. Yeah, I mean, gosh, you know, when your throat is not well and you know you're going to be working it, I mean, I'm glad he didn't cancel.
No, we had him. I had him at the theater for an hour and a half, and I forgot to send him a check. You know, I was supposed to send him a check, and I forgot. And he was real cool about it. He goes, "Bruce, I think you said you were going to give me a check for $200." I said, "Oh God, I'm so." I could not believe I'd forgotten that. You know, because
you're an honest guy. You know, he knew that.
I remember. I go, "Shh."
That's always a little embarrassing.
It is very embarrassing.
All right.
Alrighty.
Okay, good. This actually went pretty fast.
Yeah. It did. Both the shows were good. Lots of information.
Okay. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Last time for today, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. When we cut to the final commercial break, we asked this trivia question about the NBA in the 1970s. In the 1970s, only 2 players led the league in both scoring and assists in a season. Who were they?
Well, I remember Jim Barnett mentioned it earlier. Nate Tiny Archibald.
Nate Tiny Archibald was one.
Who was only about 5'7", and the other one, 1970s, scoring and assists. Boy,
I know you've heard of this guy.
Well, it's not Oscar or Jerry.
It is Jerry.
Jerry West. Oh,
yeah,
twice. Okay, I was thinking of Jerry West's greatest years in the '60s, but he had some pretty good years in the '70s too.
Yeah, he sure did.
Yeah.
Well, it was really good having Jim Barnett from the Warriors. No, he played with the Celtics.
He started his career with the Celtics, went to the expansion San Diego Rockets, played with the Portland Trailblazers, then went to the Golden State Warriors. Then he went to the New Orleans Jazz before they went to Utah. That's where they originally were. And then he finished off his career with the Philadelphia Eagles. So he played with
76ers.
76ers, I'm sorry. Dr. J, Pistol Pete, Rick Barry, Bill Russell. He played for Bill Russell. And also, we should mention the Big E, Elvin Hayes, who was a great player with the Rockets when they were in San Diego.
I would have, man, just to play with Dr. J and Pistol Pete, that would have been awesome. I was just thinking, some of those teams won. Did he win any championship?
Did not win a championship. No, but he played on some very good teams. He mentioned that he mentioned that playoff series with the Warriors against Milwaukee. They pulled off an upset, and Jim was one of the big heroes. And Milwaukee was only a couple years removed from their championship team, and they had Kareem, and they had Oscar Robertson was still on the team. The team that he first played on, Edward, in 1967 with the Celtics, did not win the championship, but they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. But the team that beat them that year was the 76ers, who had Wilt Chamberlain, Hal Greer, Luke Jackson, Billy Cunningham, Wally Jones.
Knowing all those guys.
Well, this was a great team. This was one of the greatest teams in the history of the NBA. I think they lost 9 games.
Wow, amazing. Okay, we're going to cut to our thoughts for the day here. When wealth is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. When character is lost, all is lost.
Oh, boy.
Billy Graham said that.
Well, I have to agree with him.
Okay, here's what he also said. The only time my prayers were never answered was on the golf course. Heard that before.
Spoken like a true golfer.
All right, stay tuned. Tune in next week to Sports Econ 101. We're going to be giving away more free vacations for answering sports trivia questions and discussing sports topics from a business perspective. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm Edward Brown. We're wishing you the best of Sports Econ 101. We'll see you next week.
All right. I missed that good night American.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking the same thing.